We are experiencing the modern day witch hunt. I'm going to get into explaining why this coronavirus pandemic has so many parallels with the witch hunt. But first, I got to start off by showing you this study published on PubMed. This is important to understand so you can actually get the analogy here. So let's just look at the results first. And basically, what I'm looking at in particular is the positive predictive value of the active screening was only 19.67%. In contrast, the false positive rate of positive results was 80.33%. What they are talking about is the COVID 19 test. This shows that the tests they are using are very unreliable, to say the least. So, how can we even trust these numbers? I think pretty much the vast majority of people are all in agreement that we can't trust the numbers. We absolutely can't. So, why are we locking down the entire world when we don't have reliable data? That is a good question. Before we move on, let's just look at the conclusion. In the close contacts of COVID 19 patients, nearly half or even more of the asymptomatic infected individuals reported in the active nucleic acid test screening might be false positives. Nearly half or even more. And right here, they give 80%. Wow. That means, unless we get more accurate testing, that means that they could be pulling people over here very soon, testing them, and then basically arresting them, detaining them, whatever you want to call it, quarantining them, and taking them into concentration camps, or whatever you want to call it, isolation shelters. If that makes you feel better, and putting them in there with maybe people that really do have the virus. Maybe they didn't have the virus because the test showed a false positive, and then they put them inside a building full of people that actually do have it. Well, are they going to separate the people? How do they know who really has it, especially if we don't have an extremely accurate test? They're going to put everyone in their own cell and make sure no one shares germs. This is a nightmare. This is this is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before. Now let me show you what this has to do with the witch hunt. All right, so in this post, they list 7 bizarre witch trial tests. And quickly, what the witch hunt was a time period that spanned really hundreds of years through a wide area on the planet where women, mostly women, were tried as witches. They were burned at the stake. In fact, a lot of terrible things happened to women over a long period of time, and they were considered to be witches. Some of them maybe they were into like medicine and stuff like that. Pretty much like a lot of the hipsters and stuff. It's getting popular right now. But so what this post is showing is 7 bizarre tests that basically men would do to women to determine whether or not they were a witch. I won't go over all of them, but I'll go over a couple of them just to give you the idea. And as usual, I will link all 3 of the posts I'm going to be going over in the description below if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're watching on Facebook, follow me on YouTube as well. And yeah, so here we go. First one, the swimming test. As part of the infamous swimming test, accused witches were dragged to the nearest body of water, stripped to their undergarments, bound, and then tossed in to see if they would sink or float. Since witches were believed to have spurned the sacrament of baptism, it was thought that the water would reject their body and prevent them from submerging. According to this logic, an innocent person would sink like a stone, but a witch would simply bob on the surface. The victim typically had a rope tied around their waist so they could be pulled from the water if they sank, but it wasn't unusual for accidental drowning deaths to occur. All right. I won't read the second one, the second paragraph regarding that one. Prayer test. Medieval wisdom held that witches were incapable of speaking scripture aloud, so accused sorcerers were made to recite selections from the Bible, usually the Lord's Prayer, without making mistakes or omissions. While it may have simply been a sign that the suspected witch was illiterate or nervous, any errors were viewed as proof that the speaker was in league with the devil. Now, you see how ridiculous these are? Are you starting to see why our test with an 80% false positive rate is as ridiculous as what was going on during the witch hunt? So, we've got witch cakes, touch tests. I'll just read this one real quick. The touch test worked on the idea that victims of sorcery would have a special reaction to physical contact with their evil doer. Witch cakes, witches' marks, pricking and scratching tests, incantations. I'll quickly go over this number 6, the pricking and scratching test with this post. This goes a little bit more in detail. Instead of going over the details, I'm going to show you this image, and then I'm just going to basically tell you in my own words why, basically explain what happened. And this explains where the word prick comes from. When you get mad at someone and you call them a prick, this is the origins of that word. What happened is people would hunt witches. They would get paid like a commission, for each witch that they brought in. And so there was a conflict of interest there. Not only do the witch hunters, known as witch prickers, have a conflict of interest, but also, like, let's say if a woman wanted to, maybe take some other woman's husband, or maybe they hated the woman, they could say, hey, I'll pay you to take this lady off, she's a witch, I'll pay you to take care of this. And things like that could happen. And the reason why the whole thing is just so sketchy is they designed these pricks, these needles, that were, they were clever enough to make it appear to have penetrated the skin. See, once the needle penetrated the skin, if you bled, you were human. If you didn't bleed, well, of course, that would mean that you're a witch. The only conclusion must be that you're a witch. But they created these needles that would give the illusion as if the skin was penetrated, when in fact it never was. So therefore the woman would not bleed, and then they would be taken away, and who knows what would happen to them. Many of them were literally burned at the stake. I mean, that is the worst, okay? All because these people had this silly idea, and this went on a long time. This is actually a really terrible part of history. And I see what's happening now could potentially be very similar to what happened before. In fact, we hear stories about Nazi Germany all through school, and we hear, I often hear people say, "Oh, well, why didn't the people, catch on? Why didn't the people revolt and all the other stuff?" And people act like, well, we're so awake now that we would definitely catch on. And I'm not necessarily even sure what all happened with that whole situation, but this is just common knowledge. This is just the way we all were taught the history of what happened. And so people would go into the concentration camps and never come back. And who is to say that they won't be rounding up people? They pull you over, you don't have your papers showing that you're doing something that's urgent, and they say, hey, you appear to be ill, you need to come with me. And they give you a test, give you a false positive, and then you're put into a FEMA camp / concentration camp, isolation shelter. And if they were to do that, they could easily kill you off and just tell your family you died of coronavirus. In fact, some people think that's what was going on over there in China, because they were having the huge protests from many incinerators, which was polluting their air. Also, there were Hong Kong protests that were taking place. They were wanting their freedom. Um, well, this kind of threw a monkey wrench in the gears for basically protests, because now we're not allowed to have large groups gathering together anymore. What about the protest for people demanding medical freedom, vaccine safety on DC that the media refused to report just recently, not long before this whole thing started happening? Um, this very well could be used as a way of getting rid of dissidents. That's what people think happened in China, and that could also happen here. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people because I'm on their list. They've already deleted my channel in the past, which, by the way, is more reason to give me a like if you actually do like the video, and subscribe if you want to see future videos, because I will keep putting out more videos on this until in the foreseeable future. But also, I've got a lot of other videos on a wide range of topics, so make sure to check out my YouTube channel and scroll through and see if any of those topics are of interest to you. Well, I also have a podcast. You can go to the Awareness Revolution, theawarenessrevolution.com/iTunes to go to my podcast, or I also have the Awareness Revolution podcast on YouTube, which is a separate channel. We're gonna have to wait this out and see how things work out, but we just can't sit around and just blindly trust government. We can't trust them. There have been so many instances throughout history of governments all over the world that have ended up in genocide, and we need to be on our toes, watching, paying attention, questioning what we're being told, and by all means, let's not end up cheering on another witch hunt. This is a disaster in the making. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in a future video. Thanks so much for watching. Stay awake, stay aware, stay safe, and together we'll all save the world.